right, John, welcome to the third episode of Taking Stock. Good news. The data is in. We have 187 views on episode 2. I got a comment on the golf course that they really liked your haircut. So good feedback so far. Our first video only had 42 views, I think. So we're growing at a pretty astounding pace. At this rate, Taking Stock is going to be a worldwide sensation. But one of the things you and I were going to talk about today was how it's easier to grow when you're small versus when you get really big. And I think you had some thoughts on Amazon.
Yeah, our last couple of Taking Stocks, that's really the bookstore Amazon back in 1991, and it's a lot easier to go from that to the Amazon.
The Bezos with hair Amazon.
That's right. That's back when Jeff had a full mop. So it's a lot easier to go from that little startup bookstore to the Amazon of today. Not easy.
Easier to even go from little bookstore to bigger bookstore. Amazon didn't. Right. It's grown pretty astoundingly over the last 20 some odd years.
Right. But when you're small, going from small to big is a whole lot easier than going from big to, fantastically gigantic. And right now, today, Amazon is priced to basically take over all retail transactions around the globe. And while possible, it's highly unlikely, which really makes Amazon look, by almost any metric, I don't care how bullish you are about its future cash flows, the price today looks pretty high, right? And this is...
What would you say to people who would say that analysis has always been the same for Amazon, right? It's expensive, it's a growth stock, it can't keep going this way. What do you kind of say to those people who, have heard that before about?
Well, it's kind of what I'm saying is, having a growth rate that takes you from small to big is it's so much easier. And it's part of the reason why smaller companies tend to have bigger returns than larger companies, right? There's more potential for growth. When you're a big company, when you're a big dog, it's tough to go from big to consistently bigger. And we see this in the data. So if you look at all the biggest companies in the stock market, they tend not to keep that dominance. So you'll see them cycle through that top position.
Right.
And
COVID had to have, when you think of one of the obvious winners from this whole coronavirus COVID thing, it's got to be Amazon.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Who hasn't, went to their living room and they needed something and sat down and, just bought it through Amazon. And I think you mentioned that you don't even think about anything else. That's where you go, right? It's almost regardless of what you're buying. So for Amazon, this has just been an incredibly fortuitous time. And we've talked about this in the past, how there were these trends that were simply accelerated by COVID, but some I think are kind of unique to COVID. I think you've been looking at the whole world of travel, leisure travel.
Oh yeah, it's I keep thinking about this, and hotels and cruise lines and airlines, those are all kind of things people have thought about. But I saw something on Twitter the other day, and I guess I didn't realize this, but our U.S. passports now, there's not many places we can go. It's kind of like the Balkans, a few Caribbean islands, Mexico. You could go to Tanzania, but there's not a lot of places for people to travel. And so anecdotally, and I've seen this a couple different places, RV sales are through the roof. And the Wall Street Journal had an article about how there's so many new RV drivers that they're having a rash of accidents where people don't necessarily know how to drive their RV. So people are, running into freeway overpasses or into bridges. And what was interesting about this, I read that, and then, most people want to go camp or they want to get out. And so my wife and I went and found a very, very small fishing boat, like 13-foot aluminum fishing boat to take our kids out. And we were trying to find an electric motor to take it out on Bennington Lake. And Minn Kota is kind of like the electric motor company. There were none on Amazon. There were none on Walmart. There were none on the Minn Kota website. Luckily, I refreshed Walmart randomly like 2 days later, and they had a few of them. But it's just interesting to see, obviously it's too late to sort of invest in those companies because that's obvious, to everybody. but just to see how sold out all of these companies are, and it's like a combination of demand and like severely disrupted supply chains. And I think you were saying that you're even thinking of going camping soon versus flying to Southern California.
Oh yeah, my parents live in Southern California, and we're planning a trip to go down there, and we don't want to fly, so we've got a little tiny travel trailer, and I know we're not alone in sort of making that decision. So I think there's going to be a lot of RVers on the road.
Another crazy one was Walmart is opening hundreds of drive-in movie theater locations in their parking lots.
Yeah.
So, Walla Walla is ahead of the curve here. We have the Milton Freewater drive-in, so we don't even need Walmart to do that. But I thought that was pretty interesting. What's old is new again.
Yeah, I saw an interview with a drive-in movie theater owner, and he was just giddy. I mean, he's never seen anything like this. This kind of little dying business that he had is absolutely booming, and he was just loving it.
That's crazy. Yeah, you were talking about another, probably one of the most polarizing stocks to think about pretty much ever since it's come about has been Tesla. Seems like Elon Musk is a pretty polarizing guy. Love him, hate him. But the stock is too, and you had some thoughts on which way Tesla's going.
Yeah. I think the only person in the world who, kind of tweets more prolifically than Elon Musk might be our president. So he's definitely, people got opinions about him. The interesting thing about Tesla right now is that it has, people who bet against a stock, right? Basically bet that it's way too high and it's going to go lower. Those are people who take a short position. And the short position on Tesla stock is about $19 billion today, which is the largest aggregate short position on any stock ever. So there are a lot of people betting.
Are putting their money where their mouth is, saying that Tesla is going to go down.
That's right. And then you see, and this short position has been growing over time, but it's been pretty big for a while. And all that time, Tesla has been going up and up and up. It's up about 200% this year, which actually puts it now at the 10th largest company in America, right? And if you think about one of the most popular indexes, we've all heard of it, the S&P 500. That's an index of the 500 largest companies. So there's a couple of criteria for getting onto that list, and one of them is you have to have 4 consecutive quarters of a profit, which Tesla's about to have. So they are about to qualify for entry into the S&P 500. Now, what's really interesting about this is when they do that, there's all these indexes out there who are essentially going to be forced to buy Tesla because it's going to be part of the index that their goal in life is to track. So as soon as Tesla comes into the index, if they do, all these index funds are going to have to buy it. And they're going to have to buy it at a level that I think most people would agree is very, very high. It's currently trading at about $1,900. And even the biggest bulls, the people who just, Tesla can do no wrong, they think it's going to go to 10,000. These people have their current price targets, most of them somewhere in the $1,500 range. It's currently at $1,900. And there's a lot of bears. I think a popular one is Morningstar, who say it's probably fair price is $750, half of the bulls, and way, more than 100% down or 50% down from its current level.
Well, that's got to be scary for a short seller. All those short sellers kind of seeing and just thinking about if it's the 10th largest company in the S&P 500, that doesn't just mean that they add it. That means they add it in the same weight in the S&P 500. So that would be.
And if you're a short seller, not only do you have to worry about losing money as the value goes up, you have to worry about Elon Musk tweeting at you and taunting you.
That's true. He tweets quite a bit.
Yeah. So what else do we have to talk about?
Oh, well, I think one of the more interesting things that I've read or kind of seen on Twitter recently, there was a lot of chatter about Wirecard. And so Wirecard is this really big fintech company in Europe. and basically it's one of the bigger frauds. So they're like a payment processor in Europe where they connect different countries and sort of accept online payments for merchants. And apparently they had three customers that provided almost all their profits over the last 10 years. And Ernst & Young supposedly audited them, but never actually checked to see if there was $3 billion in cash in an account in Singapore. And it turns out that there wasn't. And so Wirecard is really popular in Europe. And the reason I was thinking about this was throughout the whole PPP process that I was working through, you saw this whole spectrum of financial services companies. You had kind of conservative community banks like Baker Boyer, kind of helping clients get the right amount and figure out what they were going to do with those loan proceeds. And then you had the PayPals and the Squares and the Cabbages, which aren't really banks. They were just, I mean, you couldn't talk to a human. You typed in the numbers, the money was in your account the next day. And really part of their strategy was to gain a toehold in becoming an actual bank. And so that's kind of the golden goose for a lot of fintech companies, is to become an actual bank. And I think as a result of this Wirecard fraud basically that went on, I think PayPal and those fintech companies are going to have a lot harder time pivoting into being a bank than they would have before. But pretty interesting. It's very reminiscent of Enron in just the scale of the fraud. And when you read the timeline, they didn't even, Wirecard apparently back in the early 2000s bought a shell company, which was a call center, so that they didn't have to go through an initial public offering. So as you read this like timeline, you realize that doesn't seem like they've ever really been on the up and up with what they've done. So just interesting that a company can get that big and those financial frauds can get so massive.
Right, and there's almost certain to be ripple effects through the accounting profession and, like you're saying, in sort of how we look at traditional banking and how it's regulated.
Right, and I'm not an auditor, but I was talking to Mark Kajita and Brian Thomas, who's a consultant with us, and they say that's the number one thing that you give your first year, intern is go make sure the cash is in the accounts that they say it is. So just kind of jaw dropping.
Yeah, right out of grad school, I worked for Ernst & Young, not in the audit division, but in the indirect tax division. And a lot of my colleagues were people who had come over from Anderson after Enron went down. And it was just really a crazy thing. They said that, overnight, all of a sudden their bosses were just jumping to other firms, and they would come in each day and sit at their desk and wait for someone to tell them where to go. So big ripple effects there.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, should we call it a wrap? And
we should call it a wrap. Till next time, what do we need? Need about 500 views this time to keep our growth rate up, I think, if I'm doing the math right. No, 700. So we'll see. We'll get there.
Are we going for a pandemic growth rate? Something parallel?
We're going for exponential growth.
Exponential growth. Good. All right. We'll see you next time.